Hello everyone! In this interactive video map, we examine how the invisible curriculum operates within a bilingual learning environment in a public school in Santander, Colombia. Our case focuses on a school context where there is a recurrent presence of Venezuelan and Afro-descendant students, creating a culturally and linguistically diverse classroom. However, diversity in itself does not necessarily guarantee equity, recognition, or meaningful participation. In this context, classroom practices are influenced not only by the formal curriculum, but also by implicit norms, expectations, and power relations that shape participation, belonging, and identity. From a decolonial perspective, education should critically examine these inherited structures and promote learning environments that recognize diverse voices, cultures, and ways of knowing, according to Lushava 2019. In this presentation, we examine a pedagogical problem, identify elements of the invisible curriculum, and connect our analysis with key concepts such as critical discourse analysis, intercultural education, plurilingualism, and decolonial pedagogy.
To guide our analysis, we organize this case into 5 missions: the context and pedagogical problem, the invisible curriculum, the analysis by dimensions, the culture and nationality, and also the final reflection. This structure allows us to move from description to critical understanding. Our case is situated in a public school in Santander, where migration and regional mobility have created a culturally complex learning environment. Students bring different linguistic, cultural, and social experiences into the classroom. While this diversity is often valued at discursive level, the pedagogical problem emerges when inclusive intentions are not reflected in everyday classroom practices. As a result, participation becomes uneven. Some students feel confident to speak, while others remain less visible. The first theoretical lens we use is critical discourse analysis. From this perspective, everyday classroom language practices can privilege certain ways of speaking and participating over others. In our context, this helps explain why some voices are more present while others remain less visible. The second perspective is the intercultural bilingual curriculum. From this approach, language education should go beyond linguistic skills and connect with student lived experiences and cultural identities, valuing diversity as a pedagogical resource as proposed by Londoño 2021. The third concept is multilingualism and plurilingualism. So students do not use language in isolated ways. Instead, they move flexibly and dynamically across linguistic resources depending on the situation. However, these practices are often overlooked in traditional classroom dynamics. Finally, we draw on the colonial pedagogy. This perspective invites educators to question dominant classroom norms and knowledge structures, and to reflect on whose voices and knowledge are legitimate in the learning process. Taking together this theoretical perspective helps us understand how the invisible curriculum shapes participation, inclusion, and equity bilingual learning environments.
Well, this leads us to the invisible curriculum. Not all learning is explicit. Beyond the formal curriculum, students also learn hidden messages about who is heard, whose language is valued, and what forms of participation are considered appropriate. In our context, the invisible curriculum may appear when some accents are more corrected than others, when certain students are invited to participate more, or when one way of behaving is treated as the normal or proper one. These hidden messages shape not only classroom interactions, but also belonging and recognition. A key criticism is that diversity may be celebrated at the level of discourse, while exclusion continues through subtle identity and everyday practices. This case reveals a tension between the language of inclusion and the persistence of hidden schools norms that privilege some identities and marginalize others. Finally, language is not neutral in bilingual learning environments. Some ways of speaking are valued more than others, as we said before, and this may affect who feels authorized to speak. This is why inclusion requires valuing students' linguistic repertoires, instead of forcing them to fit into a single dominant norm.
To better understand this situation, the case can be analyzed through several interconnected dimensions that reveal how the invisible curriculum operates in everyday classroom practices. Or, how can we uncover what lies beneath these classroom interactions? To answer this question, we can analyze the situation through several dimensions. From the educational dimension, classroom practices may reproduce implicit norms about who is expected to participate and what counts as legitimate knowledge. In many public schools, primary teachers are responsible for teaching several subjects, including English, even without a specific training in language teaching. As a result, participation patterns may unintentionally privilege students who already feel confident speaking English. These dynamics illustrate how the invisible curriculum structures opportunities to speak and be heard in the classroom. From the sociocultural dimension, although classrooms include students from diverse rural and regional backgrounds, not all cultural experiences receive the same visibility. Cultural diversity in this context is not related to nationality but to different ways of living, working, and interacting with local communities. However, many classroom examples and materials often reflect urban lifestyles. This can limit students' ability to connect school knowledge with their lived experiences, revealing tensions between school culture and community knowledge. From the human identity related dimension, students' confidence and sense of belonging are shaped by how their voices, languages, and experiences are recognized. From a plurilingual perspective, students bring linguistic resources that go beyond English and Spanish, including local forms of expression and community discourses. When these resources are not acknowledged, some students may feel that their ways of speaking or knowing are less legitimate, which affect their participation and motivation. From the political dimension, educational policies in Colombia promote inclusion, intercultural dialogue, and respect for diversity. However, from a decolonial perspective, many curricular materials still privilege knowledge and representations of culture. This reflects broader power relations in education, where certain knowledge systems are positioned as universal, while local knowledge remains marginal. Finally, from the linguistic dimension, certain accents or ways of speaking English are often perceived as more correct or prestigious than others. These implicit language hierarchies can generate insecurity among students, especially in contexts where English is rarely used in daily life. An intercultural approach to language education suggests that language learning should recognize multiple forms of expression rather than privileging a single correct model of English. Together, these dimensions illustrate how the invisible curriculum operates through subtle expectations, language hierarchies, and cultural representations that shape participation and learning. Understanding these dynamics is essential for developing more inclusive, intercultural, and context-responsive bilingual learning environments in diverse public schools in Santander.
Now, we are going to talk about the difference between culture and nationality, something important in our context. Nationality refers to formal belonging country or nation state. while culture involves values, practices, meanings, identities, and lived experiences. This distinction matters because students cannot be reduced to nationality labels. Not all Venezuelan students share the same cultural experience, and not all Colombian students relate to school in the same way. So, Afro-descendant students cannot be understood as a single homogeneous group because their identities, histories, and ways of participating are also diverse. In bilingual learning environments, confusing culture with nationality can lead to stereotypes and essential assumptions. A critical and intercultural perspective requires recognizing students as a complex subjects with diversity in linguistic repertoires and experiences.
Well, to conclude, how can bilingual learning environment become spaces of recognition instead of exclusion? Well, to answer this, we need to move beyond superficial inclusion and rethink bilingual education as a space where identities, voices, and repertoires are genuinely valued. Our analysis highlights five key ideas: recognition, identity, equity, participation, and plurilingualism. These concepts remind us that bilingual learning environments should not only teach language, but also create opportunities, fair opportunities, for students to belong, participate, and be heard. So, as a final reflection, we could say that more than teaching languages, bilingual learning environments should create opportunities for recognition, belonging, and critical participation in culturally diverse classrooms. Well, that would be it. I hope you have learned something today. Thank you for watching us, and see you next time.